This is Professor Ludlum. This is Law of International Business Transactions. Today, LS 4533, and today we're looking at Chapter 12, some of the tariff laws, how we implement import tariffs. Now, when do we tax the goods? Well, we only tax imports when they've officially entered the country. How do we know when that is? When they arrive at a U.S. port of entry, and then they're inspected by customs and released. How many official ports do we have? Your imagination probably goes to about 10, and you probably think of big naval ports. But actually we have over 200 ports of entry, because we count major international airports as well as all the shipping ports. So we have a variety of international ports. The thing that's interesting about the international ports is, I guess in a practical matter, they're overwhelmed by quantity. This is a picture of one of the large shipping containers. The reason I point this out is all those little Lego blocks that are stacked on there are actually the backs of a semi-truck. Those are shipping containers. We take them, put them on a boat, send the boat across the ocean, then take those off one at a time, and each one of a semi-load is one of these shipping containers. And now some of these boats carry multiple thousands of shipping containers all at once. And you may have multiple boats coming in on any single day at any port that may only have 2 or 3 people that are doing the inspections. So an awful lot of this inspection is done on the honor system of what you report on your bill of lading as far as the goods and the value that you declare. How does it work? Well, honestly, it works an awful lot like a pike pass. When you bring in goods, instead of standing there with a sack full of money and the customs person inspecting your goods and determining what tax there is on the goods and having you pay the bill, instead it's done by your bill of lading. We have estimated duties, and then you have previously, the shipping company has previously posted a bond, and we just subtract from that bond every shipment that comes in. So let's suppose you're working for Hobby Lobby. My guess is they have shipping containers come in every single day, and every few weeks or so they get a request from customs that your bond has been reduced from all the goods that you put in. You need to put in another $1 million bond, and then they start deducting from that. A lot of transactions. If you're a single transaction importer, you'll probably have to pay right then. But for most businesses have repeated transactions, and so they post a bond and deplete the bond and then put in more money. We also have a ability to have informal entry. Basically, if you're importing goods that are less than $2,000, we have an expedited process, which basically means there's no taxes on them. It's a very basic form you fill out. If you think about it, there's almost nothing a business could import that would only be $2,000 a year. Imagine yourself running, even a Subway restaurant. What exactly would you buy that you would only need $2,000 worth of it for a year? Maybe napkins, maybe straws, but certainly anything else wouldn't be realistic. And so the informal entry really deals with those that really aren't business transactions, that are probably individuals that are importing things for their own use, or small kind of flea market businesses that have very, very small enterprises. The magic word that we use is liquidation. Liquidation is when we finally, remember, initially you post a bond. Later, liquidation is a process where we adjust it to make sure that the bond amount we took out matches what should be paid. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. And if there's a dispute between you and the customs, between the amount of import taxes that should be paid, you have judicial review within 6 months at the Court of International Trade. Remember, we looked through that in a previous chapter. The Court of International Trade is our court that specializes in all the import-export issues. And so judicial review within 6 months means that court system moves very fast. Now, because an awful lot of this deals with the honor system, because we have a small amount of inspectors compared to the amount of imports that we have, the penalties for violating the honor system are pretty severe. For example, the first time that you are caught, we call it civil fraud, and it means that the goods can be seized, and the penalties to the firm are not just the value of the tax, but the retail value of the merchandise. So if you imported, say, $1,000, 1,000 televisions that were worth $1 million, but when for retail sale it was going to be worth $3 million, if you figured out you lied on the tax form and said it was something else to avoid tax on the televisions, not only will the government seize those televisions, but they'll tax you the retail price. And so you'll have to pay $3 million plus forfeit all the televisions. So the penalties are severe. If it's a repeat offense, then it's called criminal fraud, and it can carry 2 years in prison plus all the fines. And so things can get very, very severe very fast. The key, and of course all the materials, both from the government and from the textbook, describe it that it's better to disclose any problems before they get to investigate them. One other way that the government has the upper hand in this is, remember, you only have 90 days to protest that the taxes are wrong, and then the court decides in 180 days if the taxes were wrong. If the government thinks you defrauded them, they have 5 years to go after you, and that's 5 years from the date they discovered that you committed fraud. So let's say you imported something today, lied about it on the form, so you paid a very, very small tax compared to what it really should have been. 3 years from now, you post it on Facebook saying, hey, look at all this extra money I have because I lied to the government. The government can go from 5 years from that date that you posted it on Facebook and still come after you for the violation. So it gives the government a broad latitude to go after people. Now let's suppose you have a good that you're honestly not sure which category it fits into of what the tax should be. The same way with the Internal Revenue Service, you can ask for a binding ruling. In other words, ahead of time, you can request a ruling saying, here's this good, I want to import it, tell me what the tax should be because I'm confused. And that difference in tax could make the difference of whether or not this is going to be a good transaction or something you should avoid. If the goods are going to be taxed at 5%, it may be a good transaction. If the goods are going to be taxed at 55%, that may make it so expensive that it's impossible to sell it at a competitive price. So again, you can request this information ahead of time. Now, where do we get this list of goods and the products, where the taxes come from? It's the HTSUS, the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States. The Harmonized Tariff Schedule is huge. It's 3,500 pages, plus many times more that of pages of descriptions of details that go along with the 3,500 pages scheduled of all the goods. Again, because you have to imagine every single conceivable good that could be bought or sold is listed in these 3,500 pages. And with that, then it not only describes the goods, but it describes what kind of tariff rates there are, whether it's ad valorem, basically like a sales tax, a percentage price, a specific rate tax that is so much per item, like $3 per good, regardless of the value, or what's often done now is a compound rate. So you have both an ad valorem and a specific rate. So an imported watch might be $4 plus 10% of its value is a compound rate. This shows you a sample page of the Harmonized Tariff Schedule. Again, don't worry about trying to memorize this. The key is that the goods have a numeric description. Again, it makes it easier to translate, easier to document, easier to put into computer files. So every good has a numeric number that identifies it. This page deals with the different types of sour cream. Why is this important? Because you'll notice it has two different kinds of sour cream. Kinds that are described in Note 15 that has a specific tax, kinds described in Note 5 that has the same tax, and then everything else that has 25 times as much tax. So if you're importing sour cream, you better be very sure which one of these categories your goods fit into, because the tax can vary from 3 cents to 77 cents a liter. And so a huge, huge difference on the basis of which category they fit into. Same way if you mail goods in or out of the United States, remember that little form that you fill out from the post office about customs? It also has the tariff number. Again, you probably skipped over it because for individuals, remember anything shipped less than $2,000, which is the majority of what individuals ship, the tax doesn't matter, and so people leave those parts blank. But if you're a commercial shipper, you have to fill in the harmonized tariff number for the goods, and so the proper tax can be figured out. Why does this matter? Well, the idea is that sometimes goods are not listed specifically in the 3,500 pages. If you can imagine every single good that can be sold in the United States at any kind of store, there's probably some gaps in what's being mentioned or not. This is one that was a famous court case. Tents, like a pop-up tent, like you'd use for camping, are not listed specifically in the harmonized tariff schedule. Now, are tents sporting goods or camping equipment? Well, Camel Manufacturing wanted to say that tents were sporting goods because the tax on sporting goods was very low, but the tax on camping equipment was very high. And so Camel Manufacturing and the government got into a battle about which one are tents. Are they sporting goods or camping equipment? Because again, remember, in the amounts that we're dealing with here, we're talking tens of millions of dollars in tax difference of which type of good a tent is, whether it is sporting goods or camping equipment. One of the easy ways that we do this is eo nomine, which basically means the basic name, the common name. So what's the common name of the goods, and is that common name represented in the tariff schedule? If so, that's probably the default of where that good should fit. Where does the tariff schedule come from? Again, this is not a U.S. idea, although we've certainly adopted one. The World's Customs Organization has drawn up these harmonized tariff schedules. In fact, now about 60 countries that we deal with trade with the harmonized tariff schedule. And WCO quotes that almost 180 countries, so 98% of all world exports use this harmonized tariff schedule. And so it's been very effective, and again, because it puts every good into a number form that makes it easy to identify, it speeds up the process. Even when you're dealing with language barriers between forms, the numbers are all the same. Now, we talked about the idea that liquidation occurs, that the government may ask for more money than what they originally taxed you from. Drawbacks is the idea of getting a refund on those duties, often paid. So if you've paid too much and now figured out you need to get your money back, that's called a drawback. In practice, what happens most of the time on a drawback is the government does not send you a check. Instead, they leave it on your account saying the next time you take back, bring in any imports, we'll apply that money to your next import duties. So it's very difficult to get the money back unless you show that the business has only imported once and it's not going to make any further transactions. The last idea in this chapter that people get caught off is foreign trade zones. Again, when you read this, most students think of the international big shipping ports, the big international airports, Actually, we have a foreign trade zone all over the place. Foreign trade zones are areas that are set up by our government to say that inside this foreign trade zone, we're going to let foreigners operate businesses and bring in goods without paying any tariffs, provided they do some kind of manufacturing process to the goods while they're here. And why would we do that? Why would we go without the tax revenue? The idea is that it requires them to have some part of the manufacturing process done here in the United States. And so it creates local jobs instead of being produced completely abroad and ship the final goods here. Instead, it encourages businesses to ship in the goods partially done and have the final assembly or the final production process done in America, again creating local jobs and benefiting the economy that way. And of course, Oklahoma City has its very own foreign trade zone. If you've driven by the airport, you'll notice one of those signs that you drive by and never notice. It says you're entering Oklahoma City's foreign trade zone. And it allows, let's see if we can make it come up. It describes all the different benefits and all the different companies that are there. And they bring in goods without paying any tariffs. That benefits the company. It benefits the United States because it creates local jobs. And so everybody, at least from our perspective, benefits from it. Foreign trade zone.